I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's like here. We're just glad to have a seat.
Yeah.
My concern is that
Because he has to sit next to you, so it's
what a joy it is to be able to park close this evening.
I was thinking we were gonna be back at 540 Wood Road.
What?
I thought we'd be back at 540 Wood Road.
I do too.
How are you, John?
Excellent turn.
Fine.
Thank you, sir. Red one right.
Costa, I got sugar with pecans in that orange bag.
Okay.
Jen, if you get hungry.
What is it?
I got sugar pecans
Oh, thank you.
in that orange bag, so.
You said sugar and spices? Yeah. My friend Sally, makes those. They're Sally's. And,
Is she not?
the Graham.
Is she from home?
Yes.
I know her. Yeah, I know her. Thank you for asking.
Her husband
And I told him he has
went to
name
Northwestern
and
and stood up at my parents' wedding.
She's lovely.
So we show up at the nursery school, and Ellie Shaw is Beatrice's. And
worked in restaurants for 13 years. I would say
David, you have the rock for next week.
Place I can get a very kind of extension cord on this side, you got me one on the other side.
We're pursuing it.
I got your dollar. Just one. It's all good.
he was extremely.
Oh, good. It's a beautiful day to be on the course.
No, I'm just saying. Listen, I'm not kidding you. I mean, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to laugh.
Give him a
cry.
card.
It's.
Vicki, I think public comments is being followed.
Why is it?
With this crowd.
Thursday night.
Oh, gosh, it's almost over.
Yeah, I think people are celebrated and then, yeah. Yeah, you know, there is a big contact with someone.
Just a silent participant.
The question is simple.
Anyway, I think it's very much like the first one. So only the controversial topics are saved.
Great. Vicky's running a meeting, it's gonna get 50, we're gonna, can I get this call?
Very impressed that you.
Well, I should say, we have our regular, most interested parties. That's right. Regular attendees.
Yes, there are also peer against some of those.
Okay.
Now,
Easy meeting.
peer works.
Some sort of that. Okay.
Right.
Board members, it is 6 o'clock. We're gonna start our meeting. So first of
Mickey,
all-
microphone.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so we're going to start the meeting with some announcements, which some of those who've been here before have heard. Bathrooms are located in the hallway to the left as you leave the auditorium. You will pass them on your way to the auditorium. Emergency exits for the auditorium is the same as the entrance doors, one at the top of the auditorium and one off stage. If you haven't already, please sign in at the white attendance sheet on the table outside the auditorium. The meeting is available via the Diligent Community Live Stream, available through the Park District website. Please note there is not a chat feature for the Diligent Community Live Stream. This is a business meeting. The board asks for your cooperation to maintain decorum. Please consider it and refrain from interrupting board members and other speakers. And one other announcement for board members specifically. For tonight, I do ask if you have comments or you want to say something, I would ask you to please raise your hand. I will certainly be diligent at looking, and then I will acknowledge you, and you can say your comments at that time. So at that point in time, I'm going to call to order the November 3rd, 22 meeting, Committee of the Whole. Could I have roll call?
Commissioner Root,
Present.
Commissioner Kodo,
Here.
Commissioner James,
Here.
Commissioner Rapp,
Here.
Commissioner Seaman, Commissioner Archambault.
Here. Okay, and we have Eric Lesson on the phone, so may I have a motion to allow Commissioner Eric Lesson to participate via remote means?
So moved.
Second, please. Okay, roll call on that, John?
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo,
Yes.
Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Eric, you there?
Okay, thanks, Eric. Okay. I'm sorry. All right, so number 2, changes to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, moving forward, communications, JP?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your
Commissioner
hand.
Mitchell? Hi.
No, go ahead.
I'll flag next time, okay? I want to thank Kyle for helping me learn diligent community. And as a result, on Monday morning, I submitted 2 items for consideration to be placed in this agenda. And Kyle told me on Tuesday afternoon that they had successfully been entered, but when I looked at the agenda, they disappeared without comment, which is just fine. So one of these is a discussion that Commissioner Rapp and I had with Kyle and Costa Catullas and also Mr. Crocker when we were reviewing budget. And it was a proposal for a discussion to see what we could do to get Elder Lane Beach open for the 2023 swimming season. So I would like to propose that we look at that topic or consider it under Elder and Centennial. The second one responds to a comment that we had from one of our residents who came and said that he had been in communication with a commissioner who was talking about the potential for retail commercial activity at Elder and Centennial, specifically a high-end restaurant. And so I had a proposal, and I don't think this meeting may be the appropriate time, but I just want to throw it out there, that we consider retaining R2 zoning classification for Elder and Centennial, and if we should be so lucky, also for 261 Sheridan. So those were the items I had. I also sent all of the commissioners a memo today dealing with concerns that I had relative to the November 1st, 22nd updated and replaced June 9th special meeting board packet. And I'll just hand that out to you so you have a hard copy. I have copies also for the public that I will leave with Mr. Berg. Thank you.
Okay, so have you 3?
Changes to the agenda?
Just to check what, are there changes to the agenda that you want to add?
Yes,
Mike?
they are my requests for
Okay, I
changes
gotcha.
or additions.
So
Thank you.
the first one is I'll call it a discussion. So the motion is a discussion about opening Elder Beach for 2023. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Can I just suggest we discuss that during the Elder Centennial?
I'm good with that too.
Which is on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. I think both the first 2 would fall under Elder and Centennial.
Yeah, so that would be one. The second one is retail and commercial for 261 Sheridan and maintaining an R2 zoning. So that will come under unfinished business for Elder and Centennial. And then the third for the meeting minutes that came in
I
today.
object to the distribution of this memorandum. We only received it this afternoon. There are inaccuracies and inconsistencies. I think this matter should be addressed by the board. Give us ample time to review your memo and respond.
I'm happy with that, President James. I spent last evening reviewing the tape of the June 9th meeting, and I think perhaps Commissioner Rapp may also have some other comments with respect to what we're doing in restating board packets.
All right, so before we get off track and sidetracked on this one, it came in today. I have heard the discussion about give Park District a chance to respond to this thing, as well as board members to properly review it. We're going to have a meeting next week. We can certainly talk about it in next week's meeting unless anyone has.
In 2 weeks, sir.
Sorry, 2 weeks.
And I'm perfectly happy with that. I think that's just fine.
Okay. All right.
We agreed that we're not distributing this to the public.
I would agree with that. Again, we're not voting formally on stuff. Show of hands, is everyone okay with this not being distributed immediately this evening? Raise your hand.
Mickey, just turn your mic off. Well, turn his off, and then you turn yours on.
I would agree that we're supposed to make sure that the board has consensus on the policy for updating historical minutes. We should have that discussion, and then we can, I think, discuss it at the next board meeting to vote on it, because I think there are some inconsistencies, no malintentions. I sent an email to Libby as well. I'm not going to send that to the public or anything like that, but so I think next meeting we should talk about it.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say that there's really no law or rule that prohibits an individual commissioner from disseminating information at a meeting. So we really don't have any basis to take a vote to prohibit the distribution of something that's authored by a single commissioner to the rest of the board. There is no specific policy or rule that would prohibit that.
I thought we had a policy that we were to have all board information distributed 48 hours in advance to give us time to review, so we could come prepared for the meeting. That was a policy that we discussed previously.
I think that's, if we have that policy, that should be followed. And so, the fact that this is distributed I'm not quite sure if that's in compliance with that policy or not, probably not. But the consensus I heard is that there's not going to be any discussion about it tonight, right?
Okay. So let's hold on the distribution of that stuff. We'll discuss this at the next meeting. Okay, let's move on. Communications, JP?
Earlier today, we received in our newspapers a article regarding the Elber Centennial project and the property exchange agreement. So that's the specific communication that has come in since our last board meeting. And the one I can talk about. So it'll be, it's part of the Chicago Tribune publication, so we'll make sure that's in the next packet.
Okay. Anything else on communications, JP? Okay.
Well, we had John Peterson and Steve Adams here. I just wanted an update on the communication that was brought to us from Andy Dahl at the last meeting and what our outlook is for a response to that.
I can advise you that we sent a response letter, in detail response letter to the Attorney General this afternoon. It was copied to JP, and I think his intention was to pass it on tonight or provide it
tonight
to you, Commissioner.
Or I can send them to you by email right now. Or both.
Should we discuss and close this? Are we allowed to?
There's really nothing to discuss. The complaint was provided. We've responded to the complaint. The ball is in the Public Access Counselor's Court, and as I indicated in my conveyance, my transmittal to the Public Access Counselor, I'm happy to provide any other additional information that might pertain to the matter.
John's gonna walk around that, cover that. Okay, we're going to move on to unfinished business, Elder and Centennial. Who would like to start? Warren? Anything? No? All right, well, we do have a couple of things that we said we would take under Elder and Centennial for unfinished business. So if no one else has any specific topic, one of those topics would be to have a discussion about trying to open Elder Beach in 2023. Colleen, you brought it up. Any comments or discussion points?
As we have discussed, and as the public has come and given us comments, have suggested, many people would like to see Elder Lane Beach open for the 2023 swimming season. And again, during a very productive meeting with Mr. Crocker, Mr. Catullis joined Commissioner Rapp and me, and we started brainstorming to see what could we do in exploring and asking staff if they would be willing to explore the creation of an interim design where we would not be wasting capital, not at all, but what we could do to make the beach accessible to the public during the swimming season. We recognize, or I should not speak for anyone else, I recognize that Mr. Catullis has explained that there is concrete that needs to be removed. We know there is a pier out there, but I think we could possibly secure the pier. And we were talking, and Costa, you may want to jump in here, about the possibility of working on the revetment and then doing whatever we could to make it won't be pretty perhaps, but just to make it accessible. And I don't know if there is any other, well, Commissioner Seaman, you expressed some interest. And Commissioner Rapp, do you care to weigh in on this?
Well, if you guys are okay, let's have Costa make a statement.
Mickey, thank you. Based on our discussion with Colleen and Commissioners Colleen Root and Stephanie Rapp with James Crocker and myself, there was concerns that were brought up. I'm not sure who shut off other mics. Sorry about that. As we discussed, there are options. There was concerns about trying to get Elder open for 2023. Staff at this point was not directed to look at an interim phase of what that looks like. We had positioned around 2A and making reductions in the stone as presented in the motion. We were brainstorming around ideas to suggestions that staff could possibly take care of. One thing that was suggested that would have to be completed in the second phase of work, or the initial phase of 2A's construction, is a stone revetment in front of the beach house currently, with the damaged and failing gaping baskets and blankets that are in front of the structure. I had suggested that could be done in an interim phase to complete that work. I did suggest that there would be redundancies in regards to mobilization and costs that are associated with that, and timing as far as costs. I wasn't sure how that would play into it. But the ability to remove the obstructions on the beach and to take that on as far as to put a revetment would require us to go to permit for an emergency revetment to take place. The cost to associate that, to get the permit out there, to get the drawings completed and any coastal design work completed, along with facilitating that work, would be something that I would need board direction on to move forward with. That's what was discussed in general terms, but once again, I was given direction back that for staff to proceed on that, I will need direction from the park board as a total to do so. We did not allocate a budget for that currently, as we'll show later tonight. Right now, our costs associated with 2023 solely go around the production of the plans to get to construction in 2024.
Costa, last week, we passed a motion to proceed with Elder 2A and to resubmit the stormwater improvements. How long do you expect it to take to get those storm sewer improvements approved?
As part of a discussion with James Brunel today on that very front, that would have to coincide with the submittal for the permit of the breakwater itself, because one is precedent on the other. So at this point in time, without a complete plan that's been designed and formally approved, couldn't give you an anticipated date verbatim. I would suppose that the date would probably be 2 to 3 months for review process from MWRD, and then the bid process, and then of course going out through the bid process and ultimately into construction would be probably 4 to 6 months to get through that initial phase to get under contract.
So 6 months from today puts us in June, beginning of June.
Holidays and holiday season ahead of us, I would say that's probably pretty accurate.
And a big chunk of the work is topside, installing the stormwater water quality improvement structures and replacing the existing storm sewer down Elder that runs through the park, and then laterally across the top of the park. Set all that up in advance of the work that we'd be doing on the beach. Is it constructive, or is it appropriate to assume that getting that storm sewer in ahead of bringing the trucks in for the beach work would be an appropriate sequence?
I would say yes.
So my contention is that spending money to try and open Elder while we have an ongoing construction project at Elder is money that's not well spent.
David?
My spirit of reopening Elder was, well, not really a project, just can clean it up a little bit, get some of that. I know there is a concrete slab in the water. I wasn't really talking quote unquote about, my thought wasn't really about quote unquote a design, is can we open it with minimal work to make sure that it's safe enough so that it's open. Now, if you're telling me once we touch the water to remove some of these gabion baskets, that we gotta get a permit in some way, shape, or form, that's a totally different animal. And again, I don't think there's anything in the budget for what Warren was talking about either, right? No, 2023. Yeah, that's 24. The only thing in the budget for Elderson.
We're here to discuss that tonight.
Yeah, no, I know. So there's nothing currently in the budget right now to do any work on stormwater for 2023, as far as I'm, right, we only have $300,000 in there, so.
We have design money in there to facilitate a final design to get to the next step.
Right.
There's no hard construction costs there at this time.
Right.
I was doing that for the reverb, I'm sorry.
I just wasn't looking for a lot of work. I'd love to see the park, the beach open, if it can't be open because we're working on stormwater or because it actually would take a permit to do a little bit of work to clean it up. That's, by the time we get the permit, the summer will be over. But I guess we can have further discussion on it.
I will say that, first, appreciate Costa and Jim's time earlier this week to review and go through the budget and talk about things. I don't feel like we have done a real college try on understanding exactly what needs to be done to open Elder. Can we fence off some of the areas that are exposed in the water with buoys? Can we open the bathrooms? Can people go and walk on the sand? Can people, I mean, it is an asset. It has been closed a long time. We have heard overwhelmingly from the community that there's a strong desire for it to be open. And if we're sitting there fallow with nothing actively going on with construction, we are going to have a lot of continued community upset, and that's my concern. And really, when Commissioner Root and I talked to Costa, he was saying, I need some direction from the board to even investigate this further, and I would like for him to investigate it further. It seems that we're reviewing the budget now. If he comes back and says it's going to be some not outrageous sum to just get it so that it can be open, so that people are not feeling like criminals using one of our most valuable assets during the short season that we have available to, have those assets available to us for enjoyment of residents, I think we should understand what that looks like in a little bit more detail, with a little bit more due diligence than we've done. Because we are going to be accountable to the community for having that continue to be closed for another season.
I
Go
have
ahead, Christina.
thank you. I have two sections of questions. One pertains to the duplicative costs. Just a ballpark order of magnitude, what money do you think we would be spending twice? What sort of dollar amount do you think we'd be spending twice? And then the second thing is, do you foresee any safety issues with fencing off or?
So the first question around the question of duplicating costs on the project, bringing a contractor in to mobilize for that could be a rather large number. What was given to us initially from Michaels was a $600,000 number to do that. That wouldn't necessarily be the cost. A project like what we're looking at could be done by a smaller contractor. We'd have to go out to bid and better understand what that scope of work looks like and the revetment itself. If we were to remove the gating baskets and everything else, we leave the elderly and beach house exposed if we do have storm events where we have any kind of washout or anything else, and we could dramatically impair that structure and potentially cause a further development of a higher cost. So that would be one thing I would just caution on. As it relates to taking a look at this and opportunities that are at hand, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable speaking on that tonight. I would want to better understand.
I would want to better understand what that looks like for a risk provider, DERMA, and understanding what that looks like from a risk liability standpoint, because in doing so, we know about hazards and we're inviting people to the beach. We all know that the beach is currently used even though it's closed. So for people to cross whatever fencing we might put up or would be taken down potentially or what have you into that known hazard site becomes more difficult. So I would say that we take under advice our insurance provider and what they would recommend to us if we were to provide that as a service going into 2023.
Any other comment? I'll have one, Warren and Colin. So I'll propose something, and you're probably going to throw something at me. But potentially another option is dividing Centennial Beach and making half of it for swimming and the other half for dogs. Just a thought.
I think that's a great suggestion. We have two paddle tennis courts that are in construction right now. We have a golf course that's under construction. We've asked Costa Tools to go out and source coastal engineers. And we have a major project, Elder 2A, that we authorized him to proceed on last week. I think that Costa's time is limited. It is, if he expends his energies productively, we can get Elder under construction in 2023. I think our time and energy would be best spent there, and I like Mickey's suggestion.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Vicki, I think your suggestion is wonderful because we have people that are using, as Costa knows, people are at Elder every day when it's nice weather and they're walking around. And so if there'd be a way that we could reconfigure Centennial to give the dogs a place and to give the people a place. Now that's going to be interesting because we have a lot of public people that do not want to be swimming with dogs. So we may get a lot of comments. I have two questions for you, sir. The first is, as I understood, the final sign-off on the stormwater had to come with village approval. Has that occurred?
The re-engagement has started with the village. We're reviewing the plans again, and we're going to get ready to submit, but the final submittal will have to be resubmitted by the village, and that has not occurred as of yet, but discussions to do so are ongoing currently.
Do you have an anticipated date when that would occur?
I would say hopefully by December 1.
That's very good. I lost my train of thought. I had one other question. Oh, MWRD. Where are we in the permit process there?
That same discussion that we just talked about, that process is the one that I'm looking to have completed by December 1. For the MWRD, for the stormwater, that would take us through the top. The second permit that's required for the discharge into the lake still is forthcoming. That's part of the development with the plan and having the coastal review on that as well.
Thanks a bunch.
I just want to clarify, the village, you testified last week that the village of Winnetka signed off on the permit application to the MWRD last February, and it was in for submittal, that we received first round review comments, and when as of January 9th, the permit applications were withdrawn. Is that accurate? June
9th, yes, that is accurate. To submit a permit, we have to fill out a new application because of the date and time that has passed since.
So what I'm trying to make sure everyone understands, what we did last week is we said, hey, we've got engineering plans that run from Sheridan Road down the bluff and out. The only thing that is subject to change is the actual discharge point, and that was the subject of the MWRD's permit review comments. So we've spent good money developing these civil engineering plans to get us from Sheridan down under the groin. We authorized COSTA to resume that process utilizing those existing plans. So presumably, if the village signed off on that before, we're discussing actually the point of discharge and how that interfaces with the groin. That's the open issue, not the conveyance across the park, which was already negotiated and agreed upon between the village and the park district. In addition, the access road down Elder, that too was already engineered, as was the ADA access path at Centennial. The motions passed last week to say, hey, we've got really good civil engineering plans that we already paid for. Let's get those pieces of the puzzle locked in so that we can then spend our time focusing on the actual improvements within the lake bed, the final design of the groins and the other elements.
I was just talking about
Okay, as I understand, as we continue, we're going to have applications for permit going out to the Corps and the IDNR, and we're going to be subject to public comment. In my effort to encourage us to do something to open Elder and Centennial, it is in an effort to respond positively to our constituents, many of whom are quite upset with the fact that Elder Lane Beach has been closed for 4 years, right? Oh, yeah. So if we can we authorize COSTA to move forward to look at what could be done at Centennial, so that we have some place that the south part of Winnetka has where they can use one of those two beaches.
So let's close on this so we don't spend hours debating it. So if we think Centennial might be a good idea, I would think that's not as much of a heavy lift because the scope of work would be significantly less. COSTA, you could disagree with me, please, if you think that way. But for me, it's like we approve the motion and move forward with starting on the design and engineering and RFPs and everything that's needed to get Elder in motion. That is not an easy task for COSTA to accomplish in a speedy time frame. So please, let's let them work on that stuff. Centennial doesn't go away. If we all in our hearts believe we don't have to do a heavy lift for opening Centennial for swimming, if people want to use it for swimming, great. And if they're opposed to swimming next to dogs, they can go to Maple and they can go to Tower. It's not like they don't have a beach. So I'd like to move on from that stuff because we've got other things to entertain. Go ahead, Colleen.
I'll be real quick. Are we testing water at Elder now?
Yes, once a week.
And how?
Hang on, the answer to that was once a week.
And when did that start?
About 3 to 4 weeks ago.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
That was 3 to 4 weeks ago. Okay. Last comment, you promise? Okay. Just to refresh everybody's recollection, last week we passed a motion to ensure that the ADA access path down to the seawall level, as previously designed, we could proceed with. If I'm correct, Costa, please check me. We can do that without a permit from the IDNR or the Army Corps because those improvements are above the ordinary high water mark. That may also facilitate access to the dog beach, moving the fence down to the dog beach level, and we could get both to a people beach and a dog beach. I assume.
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay. We need to move on because we're going to discuss budget, and that's not a 5-minute discussion. So we'll give thoughts to Centennial. We'll talk about it again at the next board meeting, and we'll just move on to a budget discussion. I'm sorry, stormwater budget is the next one. So if that's talking about the discharge, I think we have discussed that just now. If there was something else stormwater related, other than if everyone doesn't know, you could go on the village website. They have a link that literally shows you the progress that is occurring out on the golf course in Duke Childs Field and Little Duke Field. It has a statement about work done during the week and another statement for work that is coming up the following week. It's wonderful, it's pictorial, it's accurate, they are on schedule. The 18-hole golf course has been closed so that they can, as soon as they're ready to go out there and begin to do work on the 18-hole golf course, they've already marked the trees that are scheduled for removal. So that project, thumbs up, people are happy, it is moving forward. Does anyone have any other comments regarding stormwater? Okay, wonderful. On to new business.
You know what happens? I start thinking, and I'm got a head like a piece of Swiss cheese, a lot of holes. Where does our RFP for our licensed coastal engineer come in with respect to what we are contemplating with Elder? I would hope that we would engage that firm earlier rather than later so they can really weigh in on the parameters that we set.
Go ahead, Coastal.
That project, or excuse me, the RFP process is underway. I've reached out to and followed up with a couple coastal engineers already to date. My goal is to get that out within the next 2 weeks publicized and then circle back on that with openings, or in this case, review of potential engineering firms or design firms so that could facilitate that work in early December, and then come back to the park board with recommendation as we lead into the January 21st meeting. That plan, as discussed previously, 2A, and to Cynthia's prior motion, will be coming back to the park board for ultimate design review and approval before we proceed forward for the plan design initially. And then once again, the application will be followed up shortly thereafter for the permit itself. So that is underway, and we will continue to update the board with progress as it develops, but currently it's underway.
Other comments on that? Cynthia?
I have observed that when other boards go through the RFP process, that there's, when you get to the short list, an interview process with like your top 3. Is that something that we're intending to do? I have seen other committees, off staff and maybe a couple board members. So I'm just curious as to how we run that play, because there has been a lot of interest, so.
I would say that I have no expertise, wouldn't know what to ask, wouldn't even know what they would answer. So if there is going to be a board member, I'm going to add no value.
We've ran the RFP process different ways before. For some projects, we have included the board. For others, we have not. So if the board would like to be engaged at this point, I'll let the board weigh in on that.
I will comment to that. So, Costa, the process is, there is a vetting process before you even entertain putting someone on a list to receive an RFP. That's something that's Park District staff has done for decades. I don't think we need to change the process. I trust that you're going to be going to qualified, certified coastal engineers for getting proposals, and I don't think we need to be staff members. We should be board members and allow you to do your work. Are there any other comments on that?
You know, throughout the last 18 months, Commissioner Rapp and I have heard a lot about how we really are still in the learning process. And one of the benefits I see in bringing in commissioners, not to meddle on staff's job, absolutely not. I agree that's not the job of a commissioner, but rather to better inform ourselves on the work of a park district, to learn from it, and through that learning, to improve our processes. So I'm rather supportive of Commissioner Seaman's idea, and I would make a recommendation that seeing it was Commissioner Rapp who really started us looking at process, that I don't know if she'd be willing, but I think she would be a good team member with Commissioner Seaman.
I would suggest that we let Costa run the process. I would love to participate, but I will not participate so as to make it certain people more comfortable. But I would like to see scope of work and what questions that what questions you're asking to qualify.
Go ahead, Colleen.
I think it might be appropriate if Costa agrees that he lets all commissioners see the scope of work, sees the list of who's on the list, and just anything else that Costa, you're very experienced in this, that you think would be informative. Again, I'm trying very hard for our new board members to get up to speed so we understand what is going on, and I see that as a learning opportunity. So thank you.
Okay. What was I going to say? Just a correction for the minutes. I don't think you've been on the board for 18 months. I think it's 7 months. But so be it.
Pardon?
21, sorry. See, age just time just zooms by. Okay, any other discussion on that topic? No? All right. Anything else on the stormwater project? All right, new business, 2023 budget, long range. Oh, sorry, Costa, go ahead.
Just one last point of clarification for the stormwater piece as it relates to Elder and the discharge. Once we land on a plan, we will have to go back and issue easements along with the village for that. So that's something that will have to go through their process and through council ultimately for approval. So just be aware that's another point or another item that gets put along with that project is the easements themselves that will have to be given to the village to maintain their infrastructure.
Eric, I assume you don't have any comments? But I want to ask before we move on.
No, I don't have any comments on we only commented on the Elder
there's nothing else, we're going to move on to new business, the 2023 budget, long-range plan, LRP, and capital expenditure. Mr. Crocker. If you need a break during this, just let us know.
Thank you, Commissioner Archambault. I will endeavor to be expeditious here. As soon as Coast is back in his chair, I'm going to have him do slide 2 so we can proceed. No, you're fine. I have the advantage of being able to see over you, so. The first slide discusses the alternate revenue bond sources and uses historically and to date. As you'll see in the left-hand column, 2020 actual, when the proceeds were received by the Park District. Total revenue was $9,298,049. That year, we used money on Lloyd Shoreline and some initial funding for Elder Centennial to the total cost of $3,299,221, leaving funds remaining of $5,998,828. Moving to the next column, 2021 actuals. Some additional money was spent on Lloyd Shoreline and Elder Centennial Shoreline. A total of $400,000 was spent, leaving a balance of $5,598,422. This takes us to the middle column, 2022. Right. We initially intended to spend $10 million on Elder Centennial project. As we know, that has gone back to the drawing board. So you'll see near the bottom where it says total expended, that was what was planned to be spent in 2022. As we all know, we did not spend that. So we did not actually use all those bond funds. So that $5,598,422 balance from 2021 carries forward now to 2022, where we spent a total of $351,655, leaving $5,246,767 remaining going forward. In 2023, we have the option of drawing down on a debt certificate that was signed with Wintrust. And we actually have 2 debt certificates, one of which we're not going to use. The Series A certificate is a 5-year utility that requires a significant number of pledges, which we cannot guarantee at this time. So the Series B debt certificate, the 15-year item, is one that we are going to draw down on and add that to the $5,246,767. Now, we had budgeted $300,000 for planning expenditures in 2023 for Elder Centennial, leaving a remaining balance of $7,946,767. Now, again, sources of additional funding may include donations, but we have not built that into the budget as of yet. That's a conversation we still have to have. We have invested some of the bond proceeds in CDs, 6-month, 9-month, and 12-month CDs this year. So we will generate some interest in 2023 that will be added to this number. And based on conversations we've had recently about wetlands and bridges that need to be built, there may be some grant opportunities that Anya Kramer and I have begun discussing. So, are there any questions about this particular slide?
We put in the budget to buy microphones. I just want to make a couple points. Number one, Lloyd obviously cost more than $3.3 million. We know that we transferred money in from general and rec funds to fully pay for the Lloyd investment, which is fantastic. Number one. Number two, the Series B debt certificates, that does require a board vote. So I hope that that is on the board agenda for later this month to draw down on that. It is 2.22%. Under certain circumstances, we are allowed to reinvest those proceeds. If we do not use them and give them where rates are, we can actually make a spread. Again, we can't just do it free and clear. There are certain conditions that we have to meet to be able to invest that $3 million, but it actually could, considering potentially some of the delay in spending that, we could actually make some money off of this. So those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Christina?
I just wanted to put one date on the calendar. We probably need to trigger that draw. This is in case I get hit by a bus. I think the last business day is Thursday, December 22nd. So if everyone can calendar that, that would be the Thursday before Christmas weekend.
You can
The
vote.
15th.
You
Yeah,
can vote for it in November, and then we give them authority to draw down.
absolutely yes. But just in case we get hit by a bus, everybody should know that's the last date I wanted to happen. So that we're entitled to.
If I may respond to those comments, we have reached out to Wintrust prior to this, just to discuss the process of drawing down. It's a fairly straightforward process that does not require a great deal of lead time. So we could probably do that within 24 to 48 hours. So they would react quickly to our request.
Just don't want the Christmas party.
Right. Understood.
Don't want to
Right.
move the 3.2%.
So it sounds like, JP, that sounds like that's an agenda item for board meeting in November?
We're going to make it on the 7th.
On the 17th. Okay, cool. All right, keep going, Jim.
Any other questions or comments on this slide? Okay. Costa, let's move to the next one, please. Thank you. This slide discusses our operating funds and reserves. It is broken out by business entity, essentially, and enterprise funds. Most of the funds have an existing reserve, and you'll see it's computed through a 22 year-end estimate and a 23 budget request process. The one thing I do want to point out is the golf fund ending reserves. Because the golf course is going to be shut down for the next 2 years, we expect to draw down significantly on the reserves in that fund, which is why you're seeing essentially a zero balance. We do not know exactly where we're going to wind up there yet, but we expect to tap into most of those reserves. One thing I do want to mention on the general fund ending reserves, the top fund going across, you'll see the year-end estimate is significantly lower than the year beginning. That's because of the Cook County tax delay. All right, so we expect the year-end reserves to be low simply because the tax delay will not arrive until 2023. We will allocate that back to 2022 for accounting and auditing purposes. But as of December 31st, we are expecting the reserves to be low. Now, 2023 is significantly higher for 3 reasons. One, that delayed Cook County tax payment. 2, the sale of Library Park, which is a one-time revenue entity that will generate about $313,000 for the general fund. And the third is the employee retention credit we're going to get from the federal government of $575,000. Those 3 items have driven up the general fund balance and therefore the general fund ending reserves.
Taxes are 1.3 million. That's the number that we're not getting this year that we expect to get next year.
Right, it's 2.4 that we're going to get from the county, but that's allocated across different funds. It's not just the general fund that's going to see that. Right, so some of those taxes will go to recreation fund, some will go to NSSRA, some will go to liability funds. And so the 2.4 total will be spread out across different funds. So you will see 1.3 of that 2.4 go into the general fund. Just to clarify those 2 numbers.
Is there any relationship between the alternate revenue bonds and our reserves that you're looking into?
As a matter of fact, yes. So, our estimated ending available reserves in the general fund, about $425,000. Cook County tax distribution, 2.425, which we just discussed a moment ago, plus the ERC, Employee Retention Credit Funds, of 575, and the library park sale of 313,000. Gives us a general fund net of $3,739,001. The recreation fund available reserves, $2,590,722, minus the turf field cost. We expect to replace the turf field in 2023 or 2024 of $1,471,000. Leaves a recreation fund net total of $1,119,722. Our golf fund available reserves of $642,276, minus the what we anticipate to be approved construction costs of golf cart paths and other capital expenditures, will leave a net negative in the golf fund of $1,062,696. Therefore, our net available reserves, 3,796,027, and our available alternate revenue bond dollars of 5,246,767, plus the Wintrust 15-year debt certificate of $3 million, leaves us an available net funds balance of $12,042,794. And since that is not on the slide, I will make sure that that is distributed to all the commissioners after this meeting.
Is there any opportunity to increase our general reserves by transitioning monies to the general reserves from the alternate revenue bond?
Yes, as Commissioner Seaman alluded to earlier, some of the operating reserves were used on both the Lloyd Shoreline and early in the Elder Centennial process. Our plan is to essentially pay ourselves back by drawing out of the bond funds to refund or replenish the operating funds that were used on those projects. So once we have a specific number, we will communicate that to the board.
Why would we do that? Do we want to transfer money back to the general account so we can use it for the golf, or because that's a capital project?
Right, but we used the operating funds for capital projects, right? These bonds are allocated specifically for Elder Centennial or other capital projects. By moving that money back to the operating funds, it gives us flexibility we don't have if the money stays in the bond fund. You know, we need that flexibility with all the various projects going forward.
So when we spent the early money for Lloyd, before we did the bond deal in 2019, we borrowed from reserves.
We didn't borrow,
We drew them down.
Right, yeah.
We can use the bond proceeds to replenish those reserves. Those reserves are more flexible in their use than the bond proceeds. And we are entitled to replenish those reserves in those individual accounts. Consequently, we should. It gives us greater flexibility. Yes.
Is this one of the things we've checked out with bond counsel recently?
Yes.
Okay, because I know there are restrictions on the use of any monies that wind up in your bond fund, shifting them out of the bond fund, even in some cases, any excess interest that's not treated as arbitrage and tax. So, I just want to make sure we're very clear that we have clear direction from Chapman on that.
Yeah. And we have reached out to Chapman on that issue, and they've given us very clear, specific items, and it has to be directly attributable to these projects. It can't be indirect costs. So, okay. Any questions on the slide? Okay, on the next slide, slide number 4. Major and operating capitals. The far left-hand column is what was budgeted for 2022. The second column is where we estimate we will end the year on capital spending, both for operating and major capitals. So the 2023 request is the third column. Our plan is to spend approximately $3,329,372 on operating and major capital projects. The major capitals include the $300,000 for Elder Centennial planning, approximately $800,000 for cart paths and other associated or assorted major capital projects. As a long-range plan, you'll see we have a number of operating capitals that are built into the project, and roughly $6.5 million is allocated in 2024 for the Elder Beach plan, the 2A plan that was recently recommended to move forward. We do not have anything budgeted for Centennial as of yet. We do not have a motion from the board to move forward on Centennial, and we do not have any plans, one way or the other, regarding 261 Sheridan. So we felt it was premature to actually put something in 25 or 26, since we do not know exactly which direction we're going. But we will have approximately $5.5 million left in the bond fund after the Elder Beach program, based on the $12 million net funds available we discussed a few moments ago.
So,
Yes.
can you speak to the general fund 2022 year-end estimate that does not include Nick Corwin Fund, which I believe will actually, Mike, there are people, we got to capture this so everybody can hear it. Something about correct minutes, right?
Two things, general fund year-end estimate does not include your Corwin Fund, right? That needs to be adjusted.
That's correct.
And then, can you talk about special recreation capitals that we had 147,000 budgeted, and right now it looks like it was going to be zero? I don't know, John might be able to speak to that. I don't know why it's budgeted and why it's zero. Year-end estimate, does anybody know?
I don't have the specific information. I don't know if Costa has that. No, I'm going to turn that over to Costa.
The Nick Corwin is omission by myself, so I apologize for that year-end estimate not being in there. The original budget cost for that was $230. If you remember, that project came in over budget. We were going to draw down on the remaining funds from the Corwin Foundation that were given to the Park District to use as well, so that will be actually over budget based on what we had approved by the Park Board. As it relates to the special recreation, the dollars configured in there were associated with the ADA improvements that we anticipated for the completion of Elder Centennial. So those were the dollars to draw down or improve the park for ADA components. Now, you might think that the ADA components are a lot more than just, $140,000. We could only draw down to the cost above normal construction that allowed that to be made into ADA compliance. So the best analogy would be if a standard door is 34 inches and it costs $200 to install, a 36-inch door might be $240. We can then recoup the $40 additional cost to have that door installed, i.e. the $140 was allocated in addition for the assumption of what would be base installations and then the ADA improvements to make those ADA acceptable.
I thought that account was the NSSRA account. It's not. Okay, my bad.
Keep going, Jim. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have some questions regarding budgeting for Elder and Centennial in the current year, but I will reserve those questions until we get to that specific line item,
Okay.
rather than dealing with the selling.
Okay, Joe.
All right, moving forward, I am going to ask Costa to speak to the specific line items in the various departments moving forward. So slide 5 is the general fund capitals.
Jim, thank you. Just for ease to be able to work the computer and go through the data, I'm going to stay here seated at the table, but as we look through the year end and the estimates compared to the budgeted request for 2023, I know we've had a chance to sit down with just about all board members in one form or another. I'm going to go through the request for 2023, and if there's discussion around previous closeout for 2022 or things that might be on the horizon for 24 through 27 as associated with the LRP, feel free to jump in. So general fund, 200 award, is basically the corporate fund.
Items in there include some of the system management and the drives for that, server replacement, and then one of the IT switches as identified. Those are base things that we kind of incur costs with through the year as technology evolves and computer systems evolve. Any questions in regards to the general fund capitals for 200? Gonna feel like Vanna here in a second. 300, or Alex, I should say, after that. General fund capitals for the 300 account. Once again, fuel pumps, you'll notice that those were budgeted in 22. Those are ones that we tried to defer once we heard the real estate tax payment was going to be deferred. We started looking at trying to save where we could and trying to push some of the capitals a little bit further out. The fuel pumps was one of those items. The cathodic protection is the system that is used in our underground storage tanks, or USTs, to keep that in compliance with the Illinois State Fire Marshal. That system has run its life expectancy and needs to be replaced. And then the painting you'll see down there for $35,000 is to paint the Park Service Center. We delayed that because of the construction of the stormwater and the amount of truck traffic circulating our facility. It wasn't a good time to do that, so we pushed that off for yet another year. Otherwise, you'll notice the forklift, once again, was an opportunity to defer that in consideration with the Cook County taxes. So 2023 budgeted right now is $98,000. Any questions in regards to 300 org accounts for capitals? Moving on to 400, you'll see 400 is typically the parks themselves. Allocated for 2023 at Coeur Island Woods, we're looking at some fencing that would run along the east side of the park, where we took a lot of the pine trees down to create better separation between the school and the Park District land there. There's a backstop for Glencoe Park, paving on the Green Bay Trail, closing out on the backstop for Hat Road Park, and the color coat of the basketball courts there as well. Indian Hill has $10,000 allotted for replacement, or not replacement, but resetting of pavers that have been moved over the years. We've seen a lot of movement on pavers, and we're starting to trend back to concrete because we no longer get the impervious surfacing credits as we once did. Parks 400 will continue on the next sheet as well. There at Northfield Park, there is fencing there. The cedar fencing has been dated and it's crumbling apart. A lot of the posts have rotted into the point of replacement, and color coding for the basketball court there as well. Skokie Playfield, there's a hardscape improvements there, and pavers completed. And then you'll see some capital deferments here from 2022 for equipment, in this case trucks. Currently, we're anticipating or hoping to place orders in with Ford. They delayed the municipal orders. We have not seen 2023 orders open up yet, but we're hopeful we can get those in and replaced for our aging infrastructure. Today, we've had to replace additional transmissions. The bodies on the trucks are literally starting to rust apart, so we're looking to try to update that to get our fleet back into order, and the replacement of a 2011 skid steer trailer as well. Total capitals for 400 is $261,000 allocated or presumed for the 2023 budget. Any questions?
Does the village reimburse us for paving for Green Bay Trail?
The question was, does the village reimburse us for paving on the Green Bay Trail? The answer is no. As part of our maintenance contract, per our agreement, that is considered maintenance in what we're doing, and that is a cost burdened by the Park District.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to 400 account? The next orgs are going to be the recreation fund capitals for 100 and 1100 orgs. The 100 is the administration building. In 2023, we have ejector pits allocated along with a fire alarm panel replacement. The ejector pits, you'll note it, ejector pumps. You'll note that we're a 2022 allotted item that was deferred. Once again, we're kind of on borrowed time with these ejector pumps. So we want to make sure we allocate, but those are basically to remain in there to replace as they fail. We don't want to be able, or we don't have to come back to the board with a cost of $14,000 and change not budgeted for. The fire alarm panel is starting to show its age and come out of compliance, and we're updating that to new compliance for the state fire marshal. So that's the 1,000 org. As it relates to 1,100, recreation programming, you'll notice a $10,000 allotment. Once again, that was a deferred capital for the replacement of our traveling stage, if you will, the one that we use for special events, programming, and so forth through the community. Our old stage is at the end of its useful life. With COVID, we slowed down on the use of that, so we've deferred it a couple years now, but we're to the point where as things begin to continue to pick up, we need to replace that item. Any questions as it relates to 1,000 or 1,100 orgs? Moving on to recreation fund capitals, 1,200 and 1,400. 1,200 is the recreation fields. You'll notice in here for 2023, there is $100,000 allocated for irrigation system. This was one that wasn't initially called out during the initial sit down with some of the commissioners. It was added in by, unfortunately, just an oversight. The irrigation system, as noted here, is to serve two functions. One, to put in an irrigation system that would be complemented off the golf course work currently for Little Duke. With the relocation of number 5 green and the amount of space that's there for programming, it's going to give Kyle a better opportunity to generate further revenue for that site. Its quality of the field will go up, especially with the grow-in that's anticipated for the seeding, along with the maintenance in perpetuity. So that's what that is. In addition to that, there's about 25,000 of that 100 is allocated to complement what we have as a suggested donation from the AYSO soccer organization for Nick Corwin Park to put irrigation there. We've had budget items in there, or not budget items, excuse me. We've had quotes come in for about 75, and there's additional infrastructure that we need to bring that up to speed in regards to electric and so forth. So we're going to work in collaboration with them, being ASYO, in the 2023 calendar year. Any questions for the 1,200 account? For 1,400 accounts, saline, currently there's no allocated capitals for 2023. We do have a couple of vessels as we go out the next 2 years, or 3 years, but currently there's nothing allocated for the 2023 budget cycle. Cynthia.
I just had a question, like as an example, we budgeted these sailing boats, but we're not getting them. Is that because of supply chain, or, I know there are a lot of things that we're not getting that we had budgeted for, and I just want to kind of make sure we're clear on, is that supply chain, this isn't being carried forward, is it like overall cost reduction? Because I just want to make sure that we are spending to replace the things that we need to, and within some of the constraints that we have, so that would be helpful.
Sure. I don't believe it was supply chain as indicated. I know we have a Zamboni later that was directly or contributed to that, as well as some of the vehicles. The boats themselves were deferred based on the current numbers, I believe, and the timing of the reorder. I believe those are the two factors that contributed to the push off of the vessels themselves. Those the numbers in the programming did not facilitate it at this time. Kyle gave me a nod, saying that was it. Any other questions in the 12 or 1,400 orgs? Moving on to recreational fund capitals, 1,500, which is basically our beaches. You'll notice that ejector pumps and fire alarm system for tower have been identified, along with exterior painting for Maple Beach House and flooring upgrades. The additional ones continued on the next slide include ejector pumps and a fire alarm panel for Elderly Beach House. Once again, cost to bring us back into compliance and address potential failures in the infrastructure as we look to those upcoming beach seasons. I do realize that Elders are closed, but we still need to maintain the fire alarm panel. The ejector pumps will be used from time to time, but once again, that could be possibly something that's deferred based on the current usage.
Just for tower, what would it take to be able to sell ice cream at the beach for tower?
Sure. We would have to look into some different avenues on what that looks like. Is that vending? Is that were there physical machines? Do we look to bring a concessionaire back in? Do we look to bring in possible food trucks? I know those are all things that can address that concern, but I believe that's something that Kyle has been thinking about and will be looking into for the upcoming calendar year. What avenue we go with, I couldn't tell you at this time.
So I want to acknowledge that Kyle was nodding his head yes, so you'll get to that. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Hang on.
I have several questions that pertain to Elder and Centennial. If we go to the next page, the Centennial page.
Yep.
I noticed the glaring deficiency that we've got nothing projected 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. And I think that is a significant oversight. I did ask earlier, asked Jim several questions, so I think you have the answers to these questions. What funds remain available to be allocated towards Centennial?
We've budgeted $6.5 million for Elder, which would leave approximately $5.5 million for Centennial.
So the answer is there's $5.4 million available for Centennial.
It's 5.5 essentially.
5.5,
Yes.
okay. Does your answer to question number one include either or both of the $3 million credit facilities arranged for Wintrust?
Yes, it includes one, the 15-year certificate, not the 5-year certificate.
Does the $6.5 million allocated to Elder include the cost of storm sewer improvements?
Yes, it does. Based on,
Just yes is fine.
okay, yes.
What is the subtotal estimated cost of the storm sewer improvements is contemplated in the motion passed 10/27/22 for the storm sewer?
Approximately $1.3 million.
Does the budget include any reimbursement from the village of Winnetka for the contemplated storm sewer improvements?
No, it's not.
So let it be known that there are ongoing discussions regarding the cost allocation of the storm sewer improvements, which are village-owned improvements. They date back, a lot of it's 75+ years old, and some of it's over 100 years old. So there still remains the question of the village paying for improvements to repair and replace their storm sewer. And if successful in those negotiations, we could recoup another $1.3 million to be put into additional beach improvements. How much should we budget to complete the ADA access path at Centennial as described in the motion passed on 10/27/22?
Approximately $350,000.
Is that work that we could budget for to complete next year, President?
It could, where the terminus says, as we discussed per the motion, we can complete that. The additional cost to land that on the beach and what that looks like to actually get down to beach level still needs to be designed.
Okay, don't worry, I've got more questions. How much should we budget to complete a chain link fence on the existing south steel groin, including a gate with steps up and over?
Approximately $75,000.
How much should we budget to complete a chain link fence on the existing steel groin 260 feet north of the south property line?
Again, approximately $75,000 depending on materials.
And how much should we budget to complete a section of boardwalk from the landing of the ADA path north to get past the dog beach and provide ADA access to the contemplated swimming beach at Centennial?
Between $175,000 and $250,000 based on design materials. It's important to note, if I may.
It's intended.
Yes, it's important to note that those last four questions will be taken from the $5.5 million number I referenced before. So that $5.5 million would shrink based on these last four questions.
What dollars, if any, have been budgeted for bluff restoration as contemplated in the Lakefront Master Plan for both Elder and Centennial?
Bluff restoration for Elder has been included in the $6.5 million budgeted for 2024. Bluff restoration for Centennial has not been included.
Is there any reason why we couldn't embark upon a bluff restoration plan at Centennial, given that we're, other than the ADA access path, we're not contemplating other significant changes to the bluff?
I would defer that question to Costa.
We could move on both fronts if the park board gave us direction to.
I didn't hear your answer, Costa.
Sure, my apologies. We could move on both bluff restorations if we were given direction by the park board.
And that would significantly improve the views from the parks to the lake?
That is correct.
And there was an earlier suggestion that we open Centennial for swimming. we know we are deficient currently, and we do not meet Cook County guidelines for enclosing off-leash dog parks. Is that also correct?
We do not currently meet the guidelines from Cook County for the dog park.
So for the
Dog beach.
answers to question of 7, 8, 9, plus the ADA access path and that boardwalk, none of that would require permits or approvals from the IDNR or Army Corps of Engineers, would it?
I would suggest that the fencing, we'd have to look at the access beyond as discussed in the motions to proceed south of Centennial Beach. That is not accounted for in here, whether that's a gate, as simply as a gate put in, but that would be the one thing that I would identify that is not suggested in this cost, but yes, we could.
In keeping with Mickey's suggestion that we get moving and get some stuff done and allow Centennial to be activated, I would suggest that we budget, doesn't mean we have to do these, but budget for these contemplated improvements, that we do have a plan and the ability to show some forward progress, improving the views to the lake through the bluff restoration, providing ADA access, and properly securing the dogs so the dogs can utilize the dog beach and not create a liability hazard for the park district running onto adjacent property.
May I ask a question? Would that require a motion from the board because it exceeds our $25,000 limit? I'm just curious.
We are here discussing long-range planning and the capitals. So my intent is that we would properly allocate capitals so that we could complete this work in 2023, especially the bluff restoration, the ADA access, all these elements of the plan that really aren't contingent upon the lakefront improvements, but a demonstrable benefit to the community by improving views from the table.
David, did you want to say something? Commissioner Stephen, did you want to say anything? Or then I'll get back to you, Colin.
I just want to, I could be wrong, but under what I know, and I don't have the information you have, we don't have all the money to do everything we're talking about here. We do not have the money.
The items that I just discussed?
Right, not the breakwaters. Right. I'm including breakwaters, but you're right that there's money to do that. I really think before we start approving stuff, we got to make sure that these numbers are correct. Because just as an example, the Nick Corwin $250,000 is not included in a drain on the general or rec reserve. That's $250 right there. So we got to make sure we tighten up these numbers. And I'm not exactly sure that our reserves are what they are because golf is going to run. We don't know what the loss for golf next year is going to be.
I'm not arguing against you, Warren. I'm just saying.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not a numbers person. Everyone here knows that. But in adding it up, it looks like by the time we get done with the $6.5 million for Elder and the 5.4 for Centennial, we're not going to have much left. If we need other, David's shaking his head yes here. And then I have a question. We're talking about bluff restoration. Do we have a bluff restoration plan? Because I've never seen it if we do. Do we have a plan?
Okay, let me back up. The budget you just showed us, there's $6.5 million allocated for Elder. But that does not include a potential $1.3 million coming back to us from the village. That's what that line of questioning was in regard to.
That's correct. Does not reflect anything coming out from the village.
We passed a motion that authorized us to proceed per the existing plans to create ADA access. That ADA access path isn't simply to get down to the beach level. It's to get from the parking lot to the mid-bluff. Our current sidewalk down there, that's one of the most enjoyable spots in Centennial, and it yet doesn't meet ADA access standards. That is not a heavy lift for the park district to undertake. We authorized it last week. We can accomplish that. We also approved moving the gate to the dog beach from the mid-bluff level down to the seawall level. And if you look at the ADA access plan that was approved, there is a section of boardwalk that will be required at the seawall level that will connect to where the stairs are right now. So the idea that Nikki suggested of, hey, why can't we use Centennial? It's available. That is furthering our objectives. And the ADA access is a great thing that we already authorized. I think those improvements should be looked at as a subset of the total. And that's well within the available funds to complete those. And I don't believe they're in conflict with anything else that we contemplate. And the last point, I want to make sure it's stated clearly, we are currently not in conformance with Cook County guidelines for a dog beach. We should be securing the boundaries of the dog beach to prevent off-leash dogs from running onto adjacent property, be they other beachgoers, private or public.
Colleen, go ahead.
You know, it's somewhat interesting. Last meeting, we were talking about parameters, and then we were talking about how we're going to have a sports shop. And I will have a request that your list that you just read from, I would very much appreciate it if you would circulate it to all members of the board so we can look at this. But good golly, Miss Molly, we're off to the races here. And, you know, again, I understand allocating funds for a budget is one thing, and then doing something is another. But it seems like parameters, just, I think, Commissioner Cotto, you call them putting a pin in it. We've gone from a pin to, we're getting ready to build.
This is a budgeting meeting. If we don't budget, we will not have the funds, and that would be the excuse not to proceed. So I am identifying the fact that we have failed to budget for things that we could do. There are many things that we budgeted in 2022 that we didn't accomplish for a variety of reasons. But if we don't budget for them, they won't get done. So I am simply pointing out that we should allocate funds which are available to complete improvements that we can have further discussion on as to whether it's a go or no-go, whether the design is finalized. I'm pointing out again, ADA access was approved last week. That routing is on the tableland and down the bluff. We talked about deficiencies of the dog beach. That's an interim solution to address a liability exposure that we currently have. And it dovetails with Nikki's suggestion regarding bifurcating Centennial for dogs and swimming, and it gives us a means to gain access to both without with the key card only being needed for the dogs.
If I may, I'd like to point out that this is a preliminary draft of a budget, right? This is a dynamic living document that is eligible to be changed. So Costa and I can go back and review the numbers and build this into the budget presentation, the budget request, which the board can eventually vote upon, right? So this is not a hard and fast budget as of yet. I just want to make sure everybody remembers that.
Christina, go ahead.
I think those are some really interesting interim pieces, and I know we have steps before we put them in the budget, and steps before we approve them, and steps before we approve who does them. So all those give me some comfort. I just wanted to summarize the numbers again, because I was writing and listening at the same time, and I might have missed. $750,000 for the chain link fence to the south. 75, sorry. Oh, good Lord, I can't read this right. I apologize. 75 chain link fence to the south, 75 chain link fence to the north. ADA payoff to Centennial, 175 to 250,000. Bluff restoration number I did not get. Centennial and Elder.
The bluff restoration number for Elder has been built into the $6.5 million budget for 2024.
Okay.
We have not budgeted bluff restoration numbers for Centennial at all yet, so there were no numbers to share with you on that particular item.
But just for a ballpark, if we know.
Would you like this? Christina.
So just if we know what if we know what Elder's number is that's baked into the 6.5, we could use it as a good estimate, just a good guideline.
We could probably use that as a placeholder.
Yeah,
That's
do you
right.
know what that number is, or do you just defer that?
I would defer to Costa on that one.
Oh, okay.
Just for a point of clarification, the ADA access path was noted at $350,000 to be installed.
Thank you.
The 175 to 200,000 would be to provide access to the dog beach beyond the ADA path. So basically going from the steel down to the beach, whether that's, shored up with steel sheet piling that's poured concrete, whether it's an elevated boardwalk that descends based on, once again, as Jim identified, design and materials will further that discussion around that cost. But 175 to 250,000 is what was noted. The bluff restoration for the site, based on, once again, a rough estimate of tree removals, invasive species, earthwork that would need to be done, and then native plantings to follow suit, were anticipated at basically $100,000 per site, and that's based off of what we saw for previous projects over at Tower, Maple, and Lloyd.
Got it. Okay, so 175 to 250 is access to the dog beach, 350 is ADA access, 75 for the two fences, and then $350,000 in the budget to complete the plan.
That is accurate.
Okay, good, thank you.
So, I'll get to you in a second, I'll get to you in a second, David. So, I think Warren's point is, if we can do this next year, we better have the money in the budget, period. If we don't do it, we've budgeted for it, and so be it. That's not the first time we've deferred stuff. So I agree with his point. Let's make sure we have money in the budget for next year to do some of these things.
Yeah,
Go ahead, David.
I would agree with that as I think about it. Warren thinks about this stuff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So he's ahead of us on this one. But because we have to still go through the design, the approval, and this, Colleen, this is for you. This could be a November construction date for the ADA path. And if we don't budget it right now, it may not happen, just like many other majors have not happened over the years. We should actually get a good estimate on stuff that we could potentially do this year, if we've got the money. I agree with the way you think. I think some people might be thinking that, hey, put in the budget, we're gonna construct this thing in March or February. That's what, that was my original thought, but I get what you're saying, like, what's it gonna cost? We still gotta bid it out, we still gotta design it, we still gotta go to the public, blah, blah, blah. But in November, if it's in the budget, then we can construct it.
Yes, thank you. And it also goes to what will we have left to allocate towards Centennial without extraordinary measures. There's priority items, and then there are things we'd like to have. And the public has been asking us for cost estimates on all these things. If we continue to leave blanks here, it's an unknown. If, David, you're the one that says, hey, we need to know how much funds are available to expend in this, what's a responsible, general fund reserve, rec fund reserve. Let's at least go through the process of what do we have responsibly available to spend at Centennial, and that will constrain our design decisions.
The best budgeting process, thank you to David, and thank you to Costa, and thank you to Jim. The best budgeting process contains the elements that you want to construct in the next year with your best estimates. It's not a commitment to do them, it's simply a placeholder so that you know what they cost and you know what the elements are. It just gives much more granularity to the budget, much more meaningful.
And finally, final thing, to that end, there are certain elements of Elder that we should contemplate as being able to get done next year, and that should be pulled forward into 2023.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Costa, are you ready? I know you're taking notes, but.
Yeah, so we'll make, the way that I understand it, we'll make the allocation and the adjustments to major capitals, not necessarily here in the Recreation Fund for 1,500 beaches, but those would go into major capitals as they've been identified, and then as suggested, those will come back for design iteration review and approvals, and then further from that, go out to bid and then formally be approved by the park board. Okay, moving on to 1600, Recreation Fund's boat launch. This is Lloyd. There are no capitals allocated for 2023, but we do have a few on the horizon for 2024. Moving on to golf capitals. So this is golf clubhouse, if you will, or golf course. You'll notice that the AC in the men's or the main room needs to be deferred once included in that. That's $7,500. And then going on to the next page, we identified some ceiling work and lighting in the pro shop to be done during the closure of the clubhouse itself. We have issues there, so there's $10,000. So $17,500 is what's allocated to the clubhouse for improvements. As we move to 2024, I will note that you'll see a larger allocation of $275,000 has been bookmarked in there for improvements to the electrical service for the electric golf course fleet. That would include the infrastructure needed to the cart barn to service a lithium-ion or a battery-operated cart fleet versus a gas fleet, which we have currently. Looking at the lead time of transformers, that's when we would expect that service to be due, but we just want to make sure as we were doing future funding and budgeting, I should say, those are items that have been noted in there for the golf course. Around the clubhouse and course work, barring major capitals, is there any questions or concerns?
Lead time for transformers?
Currently at 96 weeks.
I would just say that we want Kemper to take a look at these numbers before they're finalized. That would be my suggestion. We're paying them money. Let them review them, and they might add or subtract.
Correct, and these are all numbers based on our assumption from staff to put in numbers for the budget prior to the approval of that contract. So those discussions will be forthcoming as Kemper would to be reviewing both the clubhouse and maintenance side of golf. Those numbers would be reviewed as well. So that's understood, and we will continue on that path. As we look to the Golf Course 2100 Fund, this is golf course maintenance. Now, we did include a couple shopkeeping items here around the clubhouse for golf maintenance, including some fencing that's needed to be done, design work for the course, and hardscape for the tee boxes at 14 and 18 tee. Once again, trying to take in consideration all the major improvements that we're doing. The staircases, along with the treads and the issues that we've had at those two tee boxes, was another one that we've identified. Once again, this is something we'll vet out with Kemper as that comes on to light. This is continued on an additional page with some capital improvements for equipment. You'll notice that there's a Vermeer trencher replacement, that's a 1992 unit. There's a new Procore Toro, which is a punching unit that's to help aid in the seeding of the golf course, since we're reseeding everything on the course. That's been identified. A roller, as well as a mower and Jackson tractor, Toro gang units that date back to 1979. But we're looking to replace that with a Lazak unit, which is basically a rotary pull-behind system that replaces the rather expensive long-term, or the care and maintenance of those reel systems to a rotary-style mower. But once again, these would be identified and reviewed with Kemper prior to execution on any of these.
Yeah, Costa, instead of spending more time on golf fund, we're gonna get some input from Kemper. Let's move on.
Sure.
They'll help us with the numbers.
Not a problem.
Move on.
Platform tennis capital funds, 2,300. Replacement of an HVAC unit is the only thing we have noted in 2023. Once again, that's plugged in for life expectancy. We'll try to defer and hold off as long as we can with the potential second iteration of installments, they had suggested they would like to see expansion of the HUD itself. So we want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration for sizing of the unit along with location. But right now, that's just a placeholder for the time being. So once again, that forward thinking, but just make sure that we can operate the facility. You'll notice some improvements in 2024 as it relates to some other items for upkeep and maintenance of the facility, but for 2023, it's $7,500. Any questions for paddle tennis at this time? Tennis fund itself, so the tennis fund, this is outdoor tennis, 2,400. In 2023, courts 8 through 12 outdoor, some surface repair, crack filling, and some armor that needs to go down on those courts, along with pathways that divides the courts. We have some settling issues there we need to attend to, and then repaving for that to keep things moving forward with the tennis tournament, if that was to keep coming back online, which has been indicated to us that 2023 looks like a good year for that. And then the inclusion of a shade structure. This is another omission that should have showed a budget item in 2022. I believe the budget cost that Pat had in there was around $25,000 or $30,000 initially. I apologize, I don't remember that off the top of my head, but that was identified, to be updated with the cost for concrete and with a pad to go underneath it. So that's what the $45,000 is. Once again, these would be out of the tennis fund reserves themselves, self-sustaining. Any questions for the 2,400 award?
Yeah, Costa, this does not assume that we would get any donations from any funds or from the Nielsen Foundation.
Correct. This is all self-supported by the current reserves for the tennis organization.
So if we get, don't see these numbers up.
Potentially offset these at whatever donation we might receive.
Okay, thanks.
Tennis fund, indoor tennis. You'll see in 2023, radiant heaters for courts 5 through 8 are at their end of life expectancy. This is a new item that's been included for 2023 of $30,000. And then flooring improvements as well. There's $5,000 there for $35,000 total in 2023. You'll notice in 2024, there's a rather large allocation in HVAC work. Once again, looking at life expectancy. Those units are from 2012, and in 2024 they'll be at 12 years old. Once again, looking at life expectancy, but we'll further that discussion as we look to that. Any questions for the tennis fund capitals 2,500? Moving on to the ice arena fund capitals 2,700 award. This is the ice arena itself. There's a replacement of a few heaters, some tuck pointing work. We'll see an allocation of $45,000 in there for bathrooms. That's to give the 2 current lobby bathrooms, the men's and the women's, a facelift. New fixtures, partition work, some paint, and some sinks and so forth. Once again, dated and needs to be updated. That's what Paul has been hearing for the facility, and based on if you've been in there, I would think you would agree. Painting as well, along with an ice edger, and there was an allocation allowing for a budget which was approved by the park board for the Zamboni, which going back to supply chain issues and so forth, they came back to us and suggested that that piece of equipment would not be received until mid-2023. I believe June is the anticipated delivery at this point in time. So Cynthia, to your point earlier, this is one that's been affected directly by supply chain. So this is one that's in there. Once again, this is all based out of the reserves for the ice arena, nothing as relates to major capitals or any other orgs. Any questions for the 2,700 accounts?
Just make one comment. Sorry. I was just looking at, this is a long ways off, I don't know if I'll be alive, but 2027. That $800,000 roof replacement will absolutely blow out and run through the ice fund reserve. So who's ever on the board at that time gets to deal with that one. But just to make it.
Any other questions or comments for a 2,700 org? Special recreation capitals, I think we've touched on this already. Once again, this is ADA capitals as it relates to improvements completed by the Park District, not NSSRA or anything associated with that. The capitals that were budgeted for 2022 was the estimate of what the additional cost to make the improvements ADA accessible, what we were going to try to recoup. As of right now, we have placeholders in there for each following year of $50,000. Our Jim does have the ability to adjust those as needed. So if we identify through this and some considerations that are being done with the improvements for the lakefront as suggested this evening, we can adjust these numbers accordingly to coincide with the date of those improvements and when they would occur or anticipated to occur. So we'll adjust this slide along with 3,700, or as you'll see here shortly. Any questions regards to Special Recreation Fund Capitals 3,100 work?
Just a general question, Costa. So can we, if you get a grant for ADA, is it a one-time grant or can you apply for it continuously, like year after year?
It's going to be hard to answer that one because I would have to look at the grant itself and what the requirements of the grants dictate. If it's one that is solely for a single purpose and we were to recoup all the funds for that through that single grant, we wouldn't go after multiple grants because that would put us out of running for future grants if we got caught double dipping, if you will, for grants. I would suggest that we would identify the best opportunity for the park district and go after those funds.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I just don't know if it precludes us if we get a grant once that you're one and done, or 2 or 3 years later, you have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Don't have to answer.
Sure, Jeff. It would be by project though, yes. And then the last slide here, slide 23, is capital projects fund and major capitals, 3,700 org. Listed previously, or noted previously, are the major capitals, the golf course improvements. We broke this down into 2 sections. Once again, what was identified as the base course improvements for the base bid work of the $364,283. And then we also had included the golf course cart pass, which does include the additional $195,000 for the allotment for the 2 bridges. That total is $1,340,689, and that does take into consideration a 5% contingency, which would combine us to that basically $1,700,000 and change number that we was presented at the last board meeting and approved. Ella Lane Beach projects, there's $300,000 allotted there. That is the planning work as we move forward with those projects. Construction documents, planning work, and everything else for design work and so forth. This would take into consideration costs associated with land planning, Lakota, the talk around permit design and so forth, or whoever might execute that for us, along with coastal engineering for that, and civil engineering for that. So to be able to get to the point where we have construction documents and plans in front of us, we have allotted $300,000 based on the scope of work. I think that's a reasonable number, because what we're going to attempt to do is go out with a single proposal that will have check marks along the way, if you will. So the design phase of scope under task 1, completion of any possible open houses under phase 2 or check task 2, moving into permits, moving into construction, and then CM if needed, construction management. But once again, those would all be coming in front of the park board for review and ultimately approval before we would execute on any of those project limitations or designs. Once again, we're going to make some adjustments here based on what we talked about earlier. I could recoup some of that. We talked about the bluff work for Centennial at $100,000 allotment. We talked about ADA access to the steel for $350,000 allotment. We talked about beach access for Centennial from the steel down to the beach, ranging from $175 to $250, depending on qualifications of materials and what was identified. We talked about the Centennial fencing to secure the dog beach itself in its current format of basically $150,000, $75,000 allotment per side of that. Once again, based on design and material selected for that. If there's anything that I missed, I have additional notes here about we'll make sure that we dot I's and cross T's on those additional changes, and we'll get that circulated back with the board.
Costa. it's November of 2022. I respectfully suggest that there is a lot of work that we can get done in the fall of 2023 to advance both Elder and, as we discussed previously, elements of Centennial. I do not think it's appropriate to budget $6.5 million in 2024, telegraphing that we just aren't going to get anything done. We've made motions to move forward with certain design elements of Elder, and I would fully expect that we should be in place to move forward 10 months from now, even 11 months from now, that we would have permits in place and gone through the design and bidding process and can mobilize and get all that storm sewer work done on Tableland and be mobilizing. I can't think of a better time to move rocks down the beach than over the winter versus waiting till the spring of 2024. Ideally, Elder is done by the spring of 2024, and we're over it. That's what I think we should set our objective for. Centennial, that's a different story. Elder, we should budget for success.
Yeah, that's you.
I don't think I was going to say that.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry. Was he speaking for you, Cynthia?
Jim Costa, for the list of items, is it possible to have a little schedule of those distributed to the whole board member, just all the board members, just to make sure that we are all on the same page with that, and it's laid out, and
For the 6.5.
for the 6.5, the items that Warren listed, for what we want in 2023 versus 2024. I just think we've had a lot of discussion, we've had a lot of numbers, and I think that it's something people need to see in black and white in a spreadsheet. Thanks.
I would say just instead of making these general numbers, Elder Lane Beach project, for the benefit of the board and the public, Warren brings up a very good point, that we've had a lot of asks on numbers. We've been given a lot of numbers. Maybe people haven't paid attention to them, but if we could just itemize those on this page, I think that would be under Elder, then itemize them under Centennial, itemize them, so we can all be on the same page and the community be on the same page.
Not a problem.
Okay, keep going.
That's the conclusion of the presentation for the long-range capital plan for 2023 through 2027. Are there any other questions for Jim or myself? David has a question?
No.
Thank you.
Wait, hang on. JP?
I think Commissioner Cotto was on that path, but a lot of thanks certainly to Costa Catullus and Jim Crocker. But I also want to make mention to Kyle Berger, to Matt Johnson, Michael Slezak, Paul Schwartz, Pat Vergassi, others who have contributed to get to the point that we're at, to include other members on Costa's staff. There are a lot of hands, many hands make light work, and there are a lot of people behind the scenes contributing to these spreadsheets and the figures, so thanks for being the champion of the cause. Same to you, Costa, thank you so much.
Doesn't mean you get raised. Just saying. So another thing I would like to applaud is the process that occurred before tonight's meeting with reviewing with a couple board members at a time. Great idea. It was exceptional. It asked a lot of questions. I think it vetted a lot of things, Jim, for you and Costa. So I hope that's a process that will go forward, because that was wonderful. Okay. Anything else on the budget? Hearing none. We're at that point. So I hear there's 2 buses outside. They've all had something to eat. They've got ice cream cones. All right, never mind. All right, so it's time for remarks from visitors. Remarks from visitors is your opportunity to address the board on any issue. When called upon, step up to the podium. Speak clearly into the microphone. State your name for the record and address the board directly. Please do not move the podium. They are positioned for video camera. Keep all comments under 3 minutes. This is not a question and answer forum, so please do not expect a response or answer from the park board this evening. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use the comment cards, which are available near the sign-in sheets. And the Park District staff will accept your card to be shared with the board. At this point in time, if there is indeed no bus outside and no gangling of folks ready to come in, are there any remarks from visitors? We have one.
She has to turn it.
Push the button up.
We are extraordinarily anxious to get back to the park board.
Sorry, I don't do well with black on black instructions or dark gray on black. Anyway, thank you. And thanks for your attention to detail on reading the budget tonight. That's very, very helpful. I would like to make one request, and this regards the ADA, and it's because not only does our family deal with a quadriplegic in ADA, but I have spent quite a number of years working in affiliated fields that has ADA in it. And I know that you have ADA budgeted, and I know you have ADA sketch plans, but I have not seen any indication that you have involved an ADA, someone who is ADA themselves and has had experience working on ADA projects, and particularly as it relates to Lake Michigan shoreline issues. And I would like to make a suggestion, if I might, that you take some time in the next month, perhaps, to meet with the Great Lakes Adaptive Sports people. We've worked with them up in Waukegan, and it's been extremely beneficial. And it just means fine-tuning some of your plans, but what is ADA needs for one individual is not necessarily for another. And I am concerned about particularly the Centennial ADA design as it is presently shown to the general public. You may know more in detail than I do, but that's my request. Thank you very much.
Any other remarks from visitors? So one more thing to that. You would remember from last week's meeting, we had a representative from NSSRA who came here and spoke very professionally. Craig Holt, thank you. He absolutely has volunteered his services and his expertise.
Right, but I think we need the multiple adaptive sports people in addition to him.
Understand.
This is being videotaped, so I do want to take the opportunity to respond and refresh everyone's recollection. Yes, last week we did say, in fact, we would invite additional input beginning with NSSRA, and we would solicit the input from others to help further develop our ADA offerings. And Craig was very willing to help. Susie picked the suggestion of Great Lakes Adaptive Sports. Again, terrific. I know there's other interest for folks from Misericordia and other such entities, so that should be an ongoing part of the design process.
Okay. Any other remarks from visitors? You've all been really patient tonight, so thank you. If not, we're going to move on to matters of the director.
Just a quick update for the November 17th meeting. We'll have a draft meeting agenda or meeting schedule for 2023. So you'll see that 2 weeks from tonight, just so you're aware. Certainly looking at the normal cadence of meetings, but also holidays that are woven in to the 2023 year. We started the process with GovHR for the classification and compensation study, so more to come with a detailed schedule for their work. Also, just to let each of you know, January 26th to January 28th, 2023 is the Illinois Association of Park Districts Soaring to New Heights Conference. I know Mickey has participated in the past. Each of you have an opportunity to participate. I think it's time well spent if you've not had a chance to attend. You can attend for 1 day, a half day, 2 days, whatever it might be. Finally, we did sign, big news that we did sign the Kemper Sports Park District Agreement. It was signed by both parties earlier this week. So Tuesday, I believe, was the day. So they will kick into gear next week with some initial meetings with Costa, Michael Slezak, Matt Johnson, Kyle Bird, Gracie Durham, and Jim Crocker. So we start weaving together the appropriate Kemper Sports representatives with the appropriate Park District representatives. So we're off to the races.
Questions of JP? Board liaison reports? So, sorry. Hold on. Cynthia.
Just a question from an agenda standpoint. Is there any further activity that we need to take as a board for Library Park for the next time? And are we expecting to see the money from that this year?
Thank you, Commissioner Rapp. So our steps are all completed. It's now down to the library's meeting of November 14th. So they've had some initial approval, so it's a timing issue for the library. But our side of the fence, we've approved everything. They just needed to wait until November 14th for their final approval. Then some steps that are associated with the closing process will take place. Our council believes we should be able to close by the end of the calendar year. It might bleed into January of 2023, but everything that we've looked at would suggest we should be able to get done before the end of the calendar year 2022, but more to come on the 17th.
Any other questions of JP? Okay, board liaison reports. Cynthia, you want to go first?
Just a quick reminder for the town hall on November 16th via Zoom. And then on the 17th, Kristen Calder, for the caucus, yeah. And then Kristen Calder will come to our board meeting to present the platforms, probably early in the agenda. And then for D36, referendum.
Any other liaison reports?
Just a reminder that in keeping with plank number 1, it's identified with the Winnetka Caucus for all elected bodies. We will be holding a meeting between the presidents of the village, New Trier Township, New Trier High School, E36 Library, Park District, a week from today. And we're going to try and do those at least quarterly to make sure we are cooperating with one another.
Steve, anything? No? Okay. Back this way. We really are hoping we can get back to the Park District offices and use microphones that work. Hopefully that day is coming soon. Staff reports. Kyle, I'll start with you.
I had the opportunity to meet or participate in a New Trier Township youth programming meeting earlier this week, just to identify what programming exists in the community, specifically for middle school and high school aged community members. A very productive number of different organizations represented. We were the only Park District represented, so there's good conversation, good networking all around. We have our family campfire coming up tomorrow evening at Crow Island Woods. It is fully reserved. All the spots are reserved. We have a waiting list somewhere between 20 to 30 people long. So another great event. The Veterans Day Memorial Celebration will be held next week. That will be held in partnership at the Community House, and we help facilitate that. And then finally, the brochure for winter events and winter programming is scheduled to launch on November 9th. And the registration will open shortly after that. We'll have communication going out to the community in the coming days.
Thank you, Kyle. Jim, are you exhausted yet? No? Okay. Costa, anything else for you?
Just paddle is underway. We've got the permanent link last week, Friday afternoon, evening. We were able to secure that, and we have started on our work there. So we're excited to see that underway. I know that all the work that Colin has put in and members of the Winnetka Platform Tennis Association as well are excited to see that. So we're going to keep progressing on that front, but we'll get that wrapped up fairly soon. All parties have been engaged, and we're going to continue down through that process. Stormwater, I think we've already kind of updated and reviewed that. Other than that, we're caught up. Thank you.
Okay, brings us to the end of staff reports. Next item is closed session. We have a motion to go to closed session pursuant to. So moved. Wait a minute, David, calm yourself down. The bathrooms are still there. 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C1, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body. 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C5, for the purchase of lease of property. 5 ILCS 120/2C6, for the setting of a price for the sale of lease of property. And 5 ILCS 120/2C11, for litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second? Second, roll call, JP.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp?
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman?
Yes.
Commissioner Root?
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo?
Yes.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
Commissioner Archibald?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. 8:03, JP. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Appreciate it, and hopefully we will see you soon in the Park District office. Thank you.